Well, thank you. Thank you for being with us today. Today we're going to come together and share some ideas about your mental atmosphere. Your mental atmosphere. And as I was as I was thinking about the topic, your mental atmosphere, I was reminded of two different comic strips I used to read when I was a kid. Uh, One, of course, was Charlie Brown and Peanuts. And in in that comic strip, there was a character you might recall. His name was Pigpen. The character's name in the cartoon strip was Pigpen. And Pigpen was an unwashed young man who had this aura that traveled about in the comic strip with him. That just indicated this smell that followed him wherever he went. This kind of cloud of dust and dirt that emitted from his being, and it just kind of hovered over him and clung to him. And then the other was in Lil Abner. It was a comic strip, and there was a character in there. I can't pronounce his name. It didn't have any vowels, Bitsflick or something like that. But this character always had a dark cloud hanging over his head. So wherever he went, there was this dark cloud in the cartoon box, and there was thunder and lightning and all kinds of terrible things up in this cloud. And it kind of connotated, as you read the comic strip, that wherever he went, trouble followed him, hard luck followed him. And I think we know people like that. We may have had the experience ourselves. We have some people that no matter where they go, whatever they get involved in, it just seems to fall apart. It just seems to crumble, and it turns into a big calamity. They have bad luck wherever they go. And other people, wherever they go, everything turns up roses. It's like they have a rainbow over their head, and wherever they go, there's just good luck, and the sun is shining, and the rain has stopped, and everything is wonderful, and everything is beautiful. And we might ask ourselves, well, why is that? Why is it that it seems that we make our own luck? It seems that we bring our own good or bad fortune with us wherever we go. And one way to describe that is our mental atmosphere, that we have a mental atmosphere. So think of the cartoons that I described, but think of what people would describe as the aura, the energy field that surrounds us. And some people can see those. They say they can see those. I know that as a speaker in churches for many years, I've often had people come up after the service and tell me that they perceived a certain color in an aura that was with me that day and about me that day. So think of the fact that you are not just skin and bones. You are not just this body that we use while we're here on this planet, but you are a mental being, a spiritual being, and the sum total of everything that you think and you believe and you feel, your emotions. And not just those things that you are aware of, not just those thoughts, beliefs, and emotions that are above your level of consciousness, but the thoughts and beliefs and emotions that are down below your level of awareness. You're down in what we might say is the subconscious or the subliminal. And then you even have thoughts, beliefs, and emotions that are above in what might be called the superconsciousness. Something above, something that is more connected with our spiritual nature. So we have this total atmosphere, this total conglomeration of our thoughts, beliefs, and our emotions, those that we're aware of, those that we are not aware of. And we carry that with us wherever we go. Now, Dr. Holmes talked about this a little bit in one of his books he was writing. He said that he was giving a talk, and after the talk, a lady who had been in the audience came up to him and said, "Oh, Dr. Holmes," she says, "while you were giving that talk today, I could see Ralph Waldo Emerson just kind of floating above your shoulder. He was just hovering there, and he was with you the whole time." And Dr. Holmes said it was entirely possible that she saw something that she perceived to be Ralph Waldo Emerson. And he explained it, that Emerson was such an important author in Dr. Holmes' own development, that the ideas of Emerson, the influence of Emerson, the thought of Emerson was such a part of the atmosphere of Dr. Holmes that it was entirely possible that somebody tuned into it into their own way and they perceived that as Ralph Waldo Emerson being right there with Dr. Holmes. So he was talking about this mental atmosphere, this sum total of everything that we think and everything that we believe and everything that we feel on a conscious level, on a subconscious level, on a superconscious level. It is there. It is with us, you know. And you may recall that Emerson, one of Emerson's favorite quotes or famous quotes is, "What you are shouts so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying." What you are shouts so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying. There is something about us that other people and animals can perceive. That it is kind of the feeling of who we are, the gut feeling that you get when you meet somebody for the first time. What is your instinct when you first meet this person? You know, there's just something about the person that no matter how they talk, no matter what they say, we can sense. We have a way of knowing that is kind of different than an intellectual reasoning. We have a way of knowing or feeling or perceiving something about them. You know, you see this a lot in animals. You know, animals can sense if we're afraid of them. We know that. When I was a kid, I was terrified of dogs. I was bitten by 2 dogs at the same time when I was about 5 years old. And I was terrified of dogs for many, many years after that. I was terrified of dogs. And, you know, they would see me coming and they would start growling. Anybody else would walk by them and they wouldn't give them a second look, but I would come down the street and there was something in me that they seemed to sense. Even people who spend time in nature, out observing wildlife, you know, say that there's just something even in the way that the animals seem to sense one another, that if the predator is not on the hunt, if the predator is not attempting to make a kill, the animals that would normally be the food aren't upset. You know, you'll see the pictures, occasionally you'll see pictures on the internet, you know, at a watering hole in Africa, and the lions and the gazelle are standing side by side drinking from the same water fountain. It's if something in the animal knows that there's no danger at that moment in time. Human beings who spend time in the woods, you know, talk about how if they're just walking through the woods, they might come up on an animal that they would never otherwise see, and yet if they go in the woods with, you know, with a camera or hunting and they try to find this animal, they can't. Something in the animal knows that these people intended them harm. These people were not just going for a walk in the woods. So we're talking about this mental atmosphere. There's this something. There's this something that we carry around with us like a cloud that surrounds us, but a mental cloud, an energy cloud. And here's the reason why it is so important that we consider this. In one of his essays, Dr. Holmes asks us to consider our mental atmosphere and consider that we are spiritual broadcasting stations. And he even likes that term. He goes back and he repeats it. He says, a spiritual broadcasting station. Now think about that. You know, if you've ever looked at the old movies, I think it was RKO, when the RKO movies came up, they had a picture of the globe, and then kind of like at the 1 or 2 o'clock position, there was this radio tower that came out, and all of a sudden radio signals would start to come out. You'd hear Morse code on the audio channel, and you would see kind of like these little parentheses that were moving out, these ever-growing parentheses moving out from the radio tower, and they would come around to the other side of the world, you know, and they were kind of trying to symbolize, to show in a cartoonish way how these signals migrate, how they move across the face of the earth. And if you think about that and think of yourself that way, you have this mental atmosphere But it is not just contained into your skin and bones. See, the body is in a finite place in space-time. We are here. We know that the body is here in a certain place, but the mind is not restricted by the same limits. The mind is part of that which is everywhere. The mental atmosphere goes before us before we get where we're going. It stays after us after we've left. It extends in every direction around us, because at that level, at the spiritual level, we are part of that which is without form. We are part of that which just is. So we are emanating, we are sending forth, if you want to think of it that way. Get that picture of that little cartoonish radio tower with the radio waves kind of drifting off into space. And we are like that. We are like that. Now, when wireless radio was first demonstrated in the world, Tesla, of course, invented it, and Tesla told Marconi about it. Marconi went and perfected it or built it. And later they had a patent suit over it and Tesla won. But Marconi was the one who actually brought the idea that Tesla had into being. And when that first radio transmitter was put into operation, it was a pretty crude device. They called the first radio operator Sparky, and the first telegraphist Sparky, because really all that was happening is the radio transmitter was being keyed by a spark that went through the telegrapher's key, and it generated a disturbance more than anything else. It generated a great disturbance. Like if you've ever been listening to an AM radio when there's a lightning storm on, and the light, you can see the lightning and you can hear the crackle in the radio, and that's exactly what was going on. There was just a crackle that was going forth, and there was no tuning of the radio. So this signal broadcast on such a broad spectrum of the radio frequency that any radio receiver that was turned on would hear any station that was transmitting at the time. So if two stations were trying to transmit at the same time, you would get crosstalk in the form of the Morse code would step all over. One would step all over the other. So they had to come up with a way of kind of separating or tuning the frequencies of the different transmitters so that there wouldn't be interference. And they were able to develop radios that could, instead of bursting a staticky signal that just crossed every end of the spectrum, that it was able to just send a signal in a very narrow piece of the spectrum. When I'm talking radio spectrum, it's probably easier to understand light. You know that there's a spectrum of light that goes from infrared to ultraviolet in between here, and every color in between. And each of those is really just a radio wave that falls into the spectrum that we can see. So you can imagine, if you want to think of it in those terms, you can imagine one radio transmitter is tuned to red and another radio transmitter is tuned to violet. And they're able to communicate at the same time without interfering with one another. So they had to get to the point where they could fine-tune these radios so that as they are broadcasting only the message that is pertinent to that station. And the people who are receiving only that message that they are tuned to. So it kind of changed the dynamic. You had to attune your receiver to the station you wanted to receive. And the significance of this is that we are spiritual broadcasting stations. We are constantly transmitting the content of our mental atmosphere. Whether we like it or not, we are constantly transmitting, emitting the content of our mental atmosphere. And those people who are attuned to what we are broadcasting will receive it and react to it and respond to it. So if we're in a really grouchy mood, it seems like we attract a bunch of really grouchy people into our lives that day. If we're in a really happy mood, we attract a bunch of really happy people into our lives that day. If we are positive and upbeat, we will find ourselves attracting positive and upbeat people into our lives. And if we are cynical, skeptical, sarcastic, we will attract those sorts of people into our lives. And this is why, the old saying, birds of a feather flock together. People seem to attract themselves. Like seems to attract like. They attract themselves to one another. And the other thing that we have to keep in mind is that not only are we broadcasting, but we are receiving. And what we are receiving is tuned to the same message that we are sending out. So, if we are positive and upbeat and cheerful, we are prone to receive positive and upbeat and cheerful messages. If we are afraid, we are going to be sensitive to and receive the messages of fear. And that is important, because if you want to know what you're sending out, just look at what you're getting back. What are your predominant thoughts and feelings throughout the day? Are they hopeful? Are they optimistic? Are they positive? Are they kind and loving? Are they skeptical? Are they fearful? Are they worrisome? Whatever they may be, and they may change, throughout the day, but whatever they may be, they are what you are giving out. In biblical terms, we're told, cast your bread upon the waters, and they shall return unto you. In Isaiah, it says, our word shall not return unto us void. As I love to mention, Florence Scovel Shinn says, life's a game of boomerangs. What you're tossing out, well, that's what you are getting back. So if we can come to this place of realizing, agreeing, accepting that we are in fact these spiritual broadcasting stations that Dr. Holmes tells us, and that what we are broadcasting depends upon what is in our mental atmosphere. And keep in mind, we don't always know, like we don't know what we believe at a subconscious level. There are things that part of us believes and we're not even aware of it. And there are things that we know and believe at a superconscious level. There's part of us that says God is love and you are part of God. See? There's that inspiration, that revelation that keeps moving people forward in hope. So if we can accept that we are the spiritual broadcasting station that Dr. Holmes tells us we are, there's a power in the universe that responds to that atmosphere, that we attract to ourselves people who are of like mind because they are attuned to that which we are transmitting, and we attract back to ourselves, we receive back from other people that to which we are already attuned. Then we say, well, if that's true, if that's the case, if I want to have a different experience in my life, if I want to change, I have to change that mental atmosphere. I have to have a different accumulation, sum total of thoughts and beliefs and emotions. And it's not simply enough to put on a happy face, because even though we put on a happy face, if we are still thinking and believing and feeling the old way, we are still transmitting that. Now, we're transmitting it through a mask, through a happy face mask, through a little smiley face. But nevertheless, we're still transmitting the same old stuff, and we will get back the same old stuff. It's kind of like trying to smile at the dog that's growling at you. The dog knows you're afraid. All the smiling in the world isn't going to change it. It knows you're afraid, and it's reacting to your fear. It's going to growl at you. It's going to be defensive. If you're afraid of me, maybe you're going to hurt me. So we come to this realization that our growth then, this business of experiencing a different life and experiencing more of God, really all our growth is about is experiencing more of God in this lifetime, in this experience, in the here and now, not preparing ourselves for something that's going to happen later, but right here, right now, this very moment. Then what we want to do is we want to think about this mental atmosphere. Where did it come from, and how do we go about changing it? So, excuse me. The Hindus give us a visual of an onion. If you have an onion, you start to take this onion apart, and you peel it layer by layer, and the layers are so thin that you can remove one layer, and it hardly makes a difference into the size of the onion that you have. And then you take off another layer, and then you take off another layer, and you take off another layer. And after you've done this for a half hour or an hour, you have this big pile of onion skins just laying all over the place. And in the very center of the onion, you have the core. You have the very bulb of the onion. And what we want to think is that when we come into the world, we bring certain ideas with us. We bring certain beliefs with us, no doubt. And when we come in, we have some layers of that onion skin over the core, over the center, over the truth of what we are. And from the time we're very little, we allow, for lack of a better term, we allow other people to add layers on top of our core. From the time we're very little, we're told, oh, don't eat that, it'll make you sick. Don't hang out over there. There's germs over there, they'll make you sick. Don't trust these people over here. Don't trust those people over there. Be careful when you go here. And we are taught, and our parents have to teach us this as a way of surviving in the world. And remember that word surviving, because that's what the ego wants, to survive. But we were taught all of these things to believe in. All of these powers that are other than God. We are taught about the power of evil. We are taught about the power of germs. We are taught about the power of disease. And we are taught about all of these things as if they are real powers, real entities in some cases, something that is true and exists and is trying to get you. And these constitute the layers that are over the kernel of the onion. These constitute our mental atmosphere. So what we are broadcasting, what we are transmitting, what we are putting out, and therefore what we are getting back is duality. We want to believe, or we say that we want to believe, that there's only one power, and that power is God. I very often start my treatment with the phrase, there's only one life, and that life is God, and that life is my life now. And that kind of gets me into the feeling of getting started into the treatment. So intellectually, we might say, well, of course there's only one life, and it's God. Everything came from the same source. Everything. We can go back through our parents and grandparents, so we can go back all the way to the beginning of the planet, and we can go all the way back to before there was a galaxy and all these things. And where did it all come from? Well, it all came from God. And it's all some part of God. And God is all there is. And God is the only power that there is. And there's no duality in the universe. There's not a power of good and a power of evil. There's only a power. There's only God. And it can only act in its own best interest. It can't harm itself. Can't withhold from itself. Can't deny itself. Can't punish itself. can't make itself sick, can't declare war on itself, can't hurt itself. There's only one power. And we say that. But is it really a part of our mental atmosphere? Are we really transmitting it? Are we really believing at a level of faith, believing at a level that is so certain that we no longer speak of anything to the opposite? And the way that we can tell is, first of all, what are we bringing back into our lives, and how do we talk? You know, how do we speak of things? You know, where is our attention? Are we concerned about the power of evil? Are we concerned about terror in the world? Or are we concerned about the stock market? Are we concerned about all these things? We probably are. And we have to ask ourselves, well, where does the concern come from? Do we believe that God's good depends upon what the Dow Jones closed at yesterday? Do we believe that God is separated from its creation? And what I mean by that, do we believe that, well, there are just evil people in the world? There are just evil people in the world, and they need to be destroyed? Because that's a belief that God is not within them. So we have built up these layers of ideas of separation that says, well, God is with us, but God is not with them. You listen to some of the documentaries that were filmed during wartime, before the soldiers went into battle, and you can hear the voice of the chaplain on some of these films, praying for God to protect our troops. And you have to wonder, you know, if on the other side of the lines, isn't there a chaplain there before the battle, praying for those troops, praying for God to protect them? Do you think God is really taking sides? Do you think God is really on one side of the trenches and not on the other side of the trenches? And what we have to understand is that those prayers come from an idea of separation. Come from an idea that somehow God can be with one side and not with the other side. Somehow God is even involved in this war. Rather than this war is a natural outpicturing of the human sense mind, the layers of onion skin, the human sense mind, these ideas of separation, these ideas of distance, these ideas of difference. So what we must come to realize, first of all, in our everyday living, is that you and I are the only ones who can set our mental atmosphere. No one else can do it for us. You know, and we even fall victim to that. We even say, well, you know, that person put me in a bad mood. No, they did not. You allowed yourself to enter the bad mood. Now, they may have come into your life by right of what you've been transmitting. They tuned into it, and they came into your life. But it's your mental atmosphere. You are the only ones who can change it. Even though as you were a child growing up, and even now as an adult, watching TV, listening to the radio, reading the newspapers, you are the one who is responsible for your mental atmosphere. No one else. No one else can change it for you. No one else. You have the ability, which means you have the responsibility. You have the ability to respond. And it is important because every minute of every day, and even while you're sleeping, you are broadcasting. Every minute of every day, you are attracting back into your life that which you are putting out. So the first thing that we must do is we must recognize that responsibility. We must take it seriously. You know, how many hours a day do we spend caught up in everything else compared to how many hours a day we spend diligently cultivating our mental atmosphere? We take time to care for our bodies and shower and groom and dress them. Do we take at least that much time to groom our mental atmosphere? What is the most important? So before we get up in the morning, as consciousness comes out of the sleeping state, as our consciousness comes back into our body and comes back into the room, as we become aware of where we are, we can at that very moment begin, just a beginning, we can begin to set our mental atmosphere for the day. We can begin by acknowledging God as the only presence, the only power, and the only activity in our lives. This is the day. This is the day the Lord has made. But not just for me. Not just for me. Made for all of us. For all persons. For the just and for the unjust. For our friends and for our enemies. For those in prison. For those who are sick. For those who are hurting. For all persons, because each and every one is an expression of God. And I ask nothing for myself that I would not ask for my brother, for my sister. See, we're all God's children. We are all God's expression of life. And we wish to dissolve this idea of separation. That God would give something to me and not give it to you, or not give it to them, or whoever those people happen to be. So we begin our day by recognizing that God is the only power, the only presence, the only activity. The sun shines on the just and the unjust alike. The rain falls freely. But the truth is that God's love is all that there is. And today I set my mental atmosphere entirely to love. Entirely to love. I recognize the presence in everyone I meet, in everything I meet. I recognize the goodness and the activity of God in everyone and in everything I meet. I recognize that divine love wants for me only what it wants for itself. So therefore it cannot punish, it cannot withhold, it cannot send sickness or disease. I do not accept these things as a power apart from God, and they are certainly not a power that is a part of God. And when we have secured ourselves in that feeling, right, an inner realization, an intuitive aha, a nod, then we can get out of bed. Then we can get out of bed. And then what we want to do is every minute of the day, as often as we can, every minute of the day, we want to stop and we want to check, what am I getting back? What's coming back to me today? What's coming back as a result of my mental atmosphere? Is there something that I need to adjust? Am I getting a lot of people come into my lives who are telling me how terrible the economy is going to be because of something that happened on Wall Street today? If so, do I believe in two powers? The power of God and the power of money? Do I recognize that all that there is comes from God? Everything that we have is the perfect supply of God. The food that we eat, the water that we drink, the sunshine that grows the crops. And we tune our mental atmosphere to the goodness of God and away from the mental atmosphere of the human sense mind that believes in duality. If you see the billboard on the side of the highway that says, "Help us fight this disease," do you nod in agreement? Or do you recognize the disease has no power to fight back? There's only one power, you see. There's only one power in this universe, and that power is God. So rather than give power where there is none, rather than to believe in a power that doesn't exist, remember, things are done unto us according to our beliefs. So if we believe it has power, it appears to us as if it has power. So rather than believe that we need to fight against a power that isn't there, we recognize that all we need to do is to dissolve the belief in duality and to recognize and realize that God is all that there is and the only power. And God has never wished anyone to be sick or to suffer. So what we come to then is kind of perhaps a shift, perhaps a different way of entering into our prayer, our practice of prayer, our practice of treatment, or at least a way of observing ourselves as we enter into our treatment. When we are doing our treatment, do we have a feeling that we are trying to call down a power of God, the greater power, and have it destroy this weaker power, the power of the disease, the power of the economy, the power of the enemy to harm us? See, if we think we're pitting one power against another, we're approaching it from the wrong direction. There's only one power. There is only one power. The purpose of our treatment, then, is to dissolve our belief in duality, our belief in two powers. This is why Dr. Holmes said, the greatest healer is one who sees nothing to heal. Because if we believe that this disease has got a hold and we need to fight and struggle against it, we are giving it power. If we recognize that there's nothing real there that needs to be healed, there's nothing there that has power of its own, it is only a result of the human senses, the onion skins that believe in sickness, that believe in death, that believe in sin, that believe in poverty and lack. Then we can get ourselves back on track. And this is why I often say the first step of treatment, which is, the recognition of God, is really the only step. If we can sit down and recognize that God is all that there is, and truly understand that, truly get that, we need go no further. Emmett Fox says, if you're doing your treatment and the dove alights, stop treating. And what he meant by that is we have a formula, we have 5 steps in it. And sometimes we begin our treatment, and right there at step number 1, we get the realization, the feeling, the inner feeling, the intuitive knowing. It's all done. It's all okay. God is all there is. And we'll say, okay, God, I got that, but I still got 4 more steps to go through. When the dove alights, stop your work. Stop your work. So we come then to a realization as we take these ideas, into our heart, as we take these ideas and we really roll them around, is that what we are doing in our spiritual growth, it takes time only because there's an unfoldment of consciousness. These layers come off a little at a time. Sometimes we can break right through them, you know. The old saying, don't peel the onion, just cut it if you want to get to the center of it. But usually they come off in layers. But each layer, what each layer is us cleaning up our mental atmosphere. And the way that we do this is, well, how do we do that? You know, how do I get in there and figure out what my parents told me when I was a kid, what my teachers told me, what my minister told me, what my friends told me, you know, what my older sibling told me? How do I get in there and remove those layers? And the way that you do that is not by trying to find them and dig them up and take them out, but simply pouring the truth into your mental atmosphere. Pouring the clear water into the muddy water until the muddy water is completely dissolved, completely washed away. And all that is left is the truth. How do you deal with a room when you go into a room at night and the room is dark? Do you stand there and say, gee, I wonder who made the room dark? I wonder why it's dark. Where did the dark come from? You just turn on the light. All you do is turn on the light. And when the light comes on, the darkness is gone. Because the darkness didn't have power to sustain itself. It was just a condition. That's all it is a condition. And as soon as the light was brought into that room, the condition of darkness, the appearance of darkness, disappeared. It didn't struggle. It didn't fight. It didn't groan. It didn't moan. You couldn't see it crawling out under the door. It just disappeared. Because it was only an experience. So we need not worry about where our erroneous ideas may have come from, who gave them to us, why did we believe them. We just need to recognize this. There is only one person in this entire universe who's responsible for your thought atmosphere, and that's you. And the way that you clean it up is by consciously turning your attention to the truth that there's only one power. There's only one life. It's God, and it's perfect. And it's my life right now. Now, one of the things that I want to mention before we close here is, how much do we really want to do this? You know, is our intention really to remove everything in our mental atmosphere that is unlike God until all that is left is the bright light? Is that really our intention? And if so, how much of our time are we giving to that purpose? And the reason I say that is it usually goes something like this. We're going through life, doing life the human way. We're getting up, we're going to work, we're making money, we're spending money, we're going out to the movies, we're doing all these things. And we're at a comfort level. Everything seems to be, it's okay, Maybe we indulge in spiritual practice now and then, a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the evening, but we're kind of content with doing things the way that we're comfortable, the human way. And then something starts to go amiss. Something starts to go in a way that moves us out of our comfort zone. And we think, well, this isn't right. I need to do something about this. I need to do my spiritual practice a little more frequently, a little more earnestly. And we do until the situation is resolved, whatever that situation is. If it's an experience of lack, we do our treatment until we have ourselves restored back into the flow of supply. If it's an illness, we do our treatment until we're well again. And then we go back to our old ways. We're back in our comfort zone and we go back through life until something else comes along. And if that's the case, and it is for many of us, that's the way life seems to be, if that's the case, that is an opportunity for us to ask ourselves, what is my real intention here? Is my real intention to just have a comfortable human life? Or is my real intention to discover the spiritual life, the divine life? To remove those layers of the onions to the degree that we are living in grace, we are living in the fullness of grace. That we no longer need to stop and think about supply because supply arrives as it should. We no longer need to stop and think about health because health is the natural outpicturing of our conscious communion with God. I don't know what your answer is going to be. I just know that at some point in the unfoldment of consciousness, for each and every one of us, at some point, we will say, my intention is to know God. My intention is to release and let go of every and anything in my mental atmosphere, in my thoughts, in my beliefs, in my emotions. And my intention is to let go of everything and anything that is unlike God. We ask nothing of God. We don't have to. God has already given all that there is. We only want the experience of the presence of the divine. And that's all there is. Nothing else matters. Nothing else is real. There's only one life. And that life is God. And that life is our life, right here and right now. So I invite you this day to please consider the ideas we talked about this morning. What are you getting back in your life, and what does that tell you about what you're giving out? Are you giving out what you want to give out? Are you taking time to deliberately set your mental atmosphere for the day? Are you taking time to check your mental atmosphere in the day? Do you truly desire to know God as the only power in the universe, as the only life in the universe? Do you truly desire that more than you desire a comfortable human experience? Now, I'm not saying you can't have a comfortable human experience. What I'm saying is it will come a different way. It will come by grace. You are the very love of God. If I could get a mirror and hold it up to each and every one, that would magically let them look into it and realize that they are truly the love of God. I would gladly do so. You are the very love of God. You have come here to discover the one power. You have been given the ability and responsibility to do so by taking dominion over the one thing that only you can take dominion over, your mental atmosphere. I trust that today we each leave our time together with a deeper commitment to do so. And so it is.